Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute biggest questions out there. How did life actually begin? And the answer? Well, it turns out it's probably way, way messier than you've ever imagined. But before we get into all that mess, let's rewind a bit. Let's go back to that familiar story. The one we all learned in biology class. Right. You know the picture. Life is made of proteins and DNA. It seems so neat. You've got this very specific toolkit, right? Just 20 amino acids building all of our proteins, a handful of nucleotides for our DNA and RNA. Everything looks super clean, super direct. But what if that beautiful simplicity is actually just the end of the story, not the beginning? There's some really cool new research that's starting to question that whole idea. It suggests that life didn't start with the exact same molecules it uses now. The path from chemistry to biology, turns out it was anything but a straight line. Okay, so to really get why, we have to throw out our image of a clean, sterile laboratory. Instead, I want you to picture the early Earth. Think chaotic. Think a massive chemical mess. Okay, just look at this. This is an analysis from the Murchison meteorite. It's basically a time capsule from 4.6 billion years ago. See all those peaks? Every single one is a different chemical compound. This isn't some neat little toolkit, folks. This is a sprawling, totally chaotic chemical soup. And get this, scientists figure that this one meteorite, this single rock, might have millions of different organic molecules inside it. I mean, just let that sink in. Millions. So that brings up a really important point, a huge question actually. If the early Earth was just flooded with this incredibly diverse chemical mess, how on earth did life manage to pick out the exact 20 amino acids it needed? It's like finding a needle in a haystack, but the haystack is made of millions of other needles. It's a huge puzzle. Okay, and this is where a really fascinating new hypothesis comes in. The idea is, what if life didn't start by trying to find the right molecules in all that chaos? What if it just started with whatever was easiest? All right, so let me introduce you to the hero of this new story, polyesters. You can think of them as kind of like the primitive chemical cousins to our modern proteins. They're made from these things called hydroxy acids, which are a lot like amino acids. And here's the kicker. They're super common in meteorites, like Murchison. Now, the biggest difference between them is just how easy they are to make. I mean, building proteins is hard. It takes a ton of energy, you need all this complex machinery inside a cell. But making polyesters? Well, as you can see here, it's a piece of cake. It takes almost zero energy. And this just shows you how ridiculously simple it is. Seriously, all you need are those hydroxy acids we talked about, and some cycles of getting wet and then drying out. So, picture a little pond on the early Earth, right? It dries up in the sun, then it rains and fills back up. That's it. That simple repeating process is literally all it takes to link these things together into long polyester chain. But okay, making the chains is just step one. The real magic, the really cool part, happens when you take these polyesters and put them back into water, and boom, here it is. This is the big breakthrough. These simple little chains, all on their own, spontaneously form these tiny droplets. They don't have membranes or anything, but they create their own little compartments, separating their insides from the water around them. We're basically looking at primitive protocells here. And this is a huge leap forward. One of the biggest problems for the origin of life is just keeping all the important chemicals together. How do you stop them from just floating away in the ocean? Well, these droplets, they solve that. They create these little concentrated pockets where chemistry can actually happen. So let's walk through how this might work. Imagine you've got a useful chemical reaction going on. Let's say molecule A is turning into molecule B. But there's a problem. The more of molecule B you make, the more it gums up the works and stops the whole reaction. Okay, now let's bring in our polyester droplets. If that waste product, molecule B, is attracted to the droplets, it gets sucked right out of the water. The droplets are basically acting like tiny little trash cans, yeah? They grab all the gunk, and that lets the important reaction keep on going. Okay, so that's a pretty compelling story for how things might have gotten started, right? But it begs the question, if life started with polyesters, where did they go? How did we get from that world to the protein-based world we live in today? Well, the theory suggests it was a gradual takeover.
Think of it in steps. First, the polyesters provided this super easy-to-make scaffold, a basic structure. Then, working on that scaffold, the more complex but also more stable proteins started to form. And over millions and millions of years, these new and improved protein systems just took over. They were better at the job, so they completely replaced the old polyester world. You know, the scientists who came up with this use a brilliant analogy. Think about the English language we're speaking right now. It's built on the foundations of older, dead languages, right? Like Old English or Latin. Well, the idea is that modern biology could be the same way, built on top of a now forgotten, dead chemical language. So I think the big takeaway here is this. Life probably didn't just pop into existence, fully formed. It was almost certainly a messy, scrappy process. It used whatever was lying around and easy to work with, this sort of starter chemistry, and then over eons, it evolved into the complex system we see all around us today.
And that leaves us with a really fascinating thought to chew on. If this whole polyester world was a real, forgotten chapter in life's story, it just makes you wonder, what other ancient chemical languages might be out there? What other strange forms of proto-life existed, evolved, and then vanished completely, long before the biology we know ever got started?